Greetings, programs. This is Wretch. Welcome back to Shadowrun Hong Kong. So we're here in the boat, going to talk to the rest of the crew. I mean, we've got an Isobel's mission, so let's see if we can get the others here. Let's talk to Racter, see if he's been able to track down his friends. The air in Racter's shop is ripe with the stench of old metalworking fluids. He turns to face you, a burning cigarette clenched between his teeth. Sorry about the smell. It's a long past time to purge the coolant sump. He frowns. If I had access to a proper equipment, this would not be a problem. I could clean the fluid and reuse it, but alas, halogen treatment chambers are rather hard to come by, even in a place like Hoi. He shakes his head as if to clear it. Anyway, my friend, you didn't come here to discuss the ins and outs of shop maintenance, I'm sure. So what brings you here? Any thoughts about that last run? Wait, did we take him on the run? I don't remember. No, I don't believe we did. So, let's go ahead and... I've been thinking about what we talked about last time. Mind if I ask you a few questions? He tilts his head in acquiescence. Be my guest. I have no secrets to keep. About the drone self-repair system that you invented. How did it work? There were three distinct elements to my approach. When these elements were all working in concert, prototypes that utilized the process displayed remarkable self-repair capabilities. This may be a lengthy explanation. I can skim over if you please, or I can break it down for you if you're generally interested. Well, let's just go through the long version. I want to know how this process of yours works. He shifts his cigarette to the corner of his mouth. Oh, that's a bad sign. Very well. The long version it is. The first element of my process was an outer skin that the drone could be wrapped in, a refinement of older biometric self-healing materials modeled to emulate the self-repair capabilities of living beings. Imagine a polymer composite interlaced with microtubules, capillaries if you will. These vessels are capable of delivering bonding agents to the site of a wound as it occurs, thus healing it. Interesting. Go on. The second element involves the underlying structure of the drone's architecture, the servos, gears, circuits, etc. Utilizing self-assembling materials and redundant systems, I created a system by which damaged components could be fabricated and replaced by the drone itself without any need for human interference. Alright, so you have a self-healing skin and a self-replacing underlying structure. What was the third part? Finally, the system had a magical component. The corner of his mouth dips downward. I must confess a certain degree of ignorance when it comes to this portion of the project. I understand some of the theory behind what was done, but the specifics are beyond me. I'm surprised. I thought that this was your process through and through. Oh, it is. I was the one who recognized the need for a magical component. But I feel no shame in admitting that I cannot understand the specifics. I have a mind for figures, and physics, and the natural world. Magic works according to a different set of principles altogether. Truth be told, it makes my head hurt. Okay, so why did you need this third component? You said that it was your idea. In layman's terms, a magical element was necessary to render the system self-perpetuating. Obviously, no purely mechanical system can repair itself indefinitely. The synthetic skin becomes more brittle with every wound that it heals, and the automated assembly components will eventually run out of materials to work with. As a rule, fighting against entropy is a losing proposition. But with magic, we can rewrite the rules, weaken the grasp of those entropic forces to the point that they are rendered negligible. Think of magic as the lubrication that keeps the gears turning. I wish that it were necessary, but I am also a realist, and I must confess that it is required for the system to work. And this package of systems is what your former colleagues stole from you? What you need to get back? Yes. Given enough time and resources, I might be able to recreate the first two components of the system on my own. But the magical component is, and will forever be, completely beyond me. That is why it's so important that we can cover my research and the prototype that was stolen. And we will recover them. Of that I have no doubt. What do you think that a post-human future would mean? Freedom. He takes a long drag on his cigarette, sucking the smoke deep into his lungs. When he speaks, it erupts from his mouth like in a plume. The ultimate freedom to direct our own progress, and to steer ourselves as a people in whatever direction we wish. Consider, my friend, every aspect of Koshi was tailor-made for a purpose. dreamed up, designed, and built by a singular guiding intellect. Alright, keep going. Now think of the circumstances surrounding your own birth, and the building blocks that shaped you into the man you are today. Your mother and father exchanged fluids, sloppily, no doubt, but with all the mindless abandon that such biological imperatives entail. That might have been the ugliest description of sex I've ever heard. Ugly, perhaps, but accurate. Sexual intercourse is an inarticulate process, a messy delivery mechanism for genetic material spurned on by hormones and base urges. Any attempt to guide the process on a societal level gets branded eugenics and decried as monstrous, for obvious reasons. But I digress. The point I was making was that the forces that shaped you, and me, and anyone else you cared to mention, were ultimately mindless ones, blind, manipulative biological drives that led a sperm and an egg to collide. Add in a roll of the dice and a dash of Mendelian genetics, and here you are. The natural processes of evolution and sexual selection guide the development of our species through trial and error. Throw a few billion darts at the wall and see what sticks. In the future that I foresee, this process will be reined in, guided by our own controlling intellects. To co-opt an antiquated phrase, the myth of intelligent design will become a reality, but we will be our own gods, reshaping ourselves as we see fit. Let's see. Well, biological evolution is full of choice, Racter. We choose who we mate with. That choice helps to determine the traits that our offspring will inherit. Very true, but the pool of possible traits that biological reproduction can collect for is small. If I wanted to produce offspring with gill slits instead of lungs, I'd be out of luck. In a post-human future, I would face no such limitations, nor would anybody. We would no longer be slaves to the selective processes that have dictated our development since time immemorial. We would truly become the masters of our own fate. So, let's say that you're right. At what point do we cease being human and become something else instead? He shrugs. Whenever we choose to define ourselves in that way. Humanity is an intrinsically human concept. If we decide to rebound ourselves as a different species, that is our decision to make. I strongly suspect that nobody else would care. Wow. Well, there are other forms of intelligent life out there, Racter. Dragons, for example. They might care. Perhaps. But for the sake of our continued development, that's a risk I am willing to take. We cannot limit ourselves out of fear of what others might think. Koshi raises itself up on its legs, stretching so that Racter can caress its chassis. The motion is alarmingly fluid, more like a living thing than a machine. Racter traces his fingertips over the drone's shell, his eyes focused on an imaginary point on the horizon. We have placed such unnecessary limitations on ourselves, my friend. It fills my heart with sorrow to know what we could be, but they're not. I would see those limits stripped away, peeled back and discarded, for the betterment of all. Man, Racter would make an awesome villain. In the future that I foresee, we will open our eyes to the possibilities that surround us. Bodies reshaped to thrive in the deep ocean and the depths of space. Bodies inspired by nature or the human imagination, or both. Bodies that can be used and shed and used again, inhabited as their wearers see fit. The timely realization of such a future is what drives me forward. It is the cause to which I have devoted my life, and thankfully, it is inevitable. He tips his cigarette, sending ash spilling down onto the floor. Assuming, of course, that we don't destroy ourselves first. How very Russian. There's a hard limit to the fusion of man and machine. Doesn't your vision of the future require us to get past that? You're speaking of the essence limit and the problems associated with essence loss. He releases a plume of smoke from the corner of his mouth. Yes, of course, there will be a problem. As with all problems, a workaround will present itself. Of this, I am certain. Are you basing that on anything, or are you just taking it on faith? He smirks at you. No, my friend, I am not taking it on faith. My beliefs are rooted in my own observations and experiences. For the time being, let us leave the matter at that. Well, so in this post-human future that you're trying to bring about, what role would a drone like Koshi play? A similar one to the role that he plays now, I imagine. He was designed for a purpose, after all. That said, I can see the techniques that went into his design and fabrication having much broader-ranging applications. Well, you're pretty attached to that drone of yours, aren't you? You've even assigned it a gender. You keep calling it him. Yes, of course. Koshi is very close to me. As if on cue, the drone scuttles forward, the hardened tips of its claws screeching across the metal floor of the shop. It comes up short just in front of you, a strange mechanical chitter rising from deep within its chassis. You might accuse me of that word, my little companion, assigning human characteristics to him where in fact there are none. Truth be told, there is much more to Koshi than meets the eye, but that is a different conversation. One best suited to be held for another time. Why? Why not talk about it now? Because I have work to do, and I'm sure that you can find better uses for your time than listening to me prattle on. He gestures toward the hatch in the ceiling. And with that, I'm afraid that I must ask you to show yourself out. We can continue our talk at a later time. Alright, Racter, we'll talk later. He turns away. Good night. Sorry, I like talking to Racter because I like doing that voice. He's very well written, too. Alrighty. Anything new in the box of mementos? Paper fan, statuette. Did we have the statuette before? The statue, round face. Okay, this is new. The statuette is of a round-faced bodhisattva. I don't know how to put it. That's essentially a Buddha. Its head canted slightly to one side. Its hands are pressed together in prayer, and a tiny red bib is tied around its neck. The figure's expression is serene. It bears a slightly crooked smile, as if it knew a secret or had heard a joke. What's this tiny statue with the bib? Gaichu pauses, turning an ear more fully towards you. Ah, it is a statue of Jizo, the protector of children. He is also the guardian of travelers. Statues of him are placed out along almost every road in Japan. His name outside of Japan is Sideganarba. You don't seem like a person who cares about having kids. I have no interest in having children. I did at one time, but no longer. I have kept the statue not because of my love of Jizo's role, but of his temple in Kyoto. It was one of my few refuges from the world when I lived in the city. Jizo-in is a tiny place. It is fairly close to the much larger and better-known sister temple of Saihoji on the western edge of Kyoto. Unlike Saihoji, however, Jinzo-in is almost unknown. Gaichu smiles fondly, looking sightlessly into the distance. To get there, you have to walk through twisting residential streets, past a deep green grove of bamboo. If you do not know what you are looking for, you will never find it. Most people assume the road it's on is simply a dead end. I recall walking there in a light rain. I could smell the ginkgo and maple leaves in a slight breeze. I would go there and simply sit and let myself be whenever I felt the stress of school was too much for me. Inside, there are several small shrines, but the main attraction is the moss garden. You enter a very old meditation room from a small gate. You take off your shoes, you sit at the edge of the garden and feel the world outside slip from your mind like water through a sieve. Just you, the breeze, the trees, and the moss. That garden was a microcosm of my world, stripped bare of any confusion and bustle. That sounds nice, actually. Smiling faintly, Gaichu dips his head. I rather thought so. I never saw more than other than two other people in the temple, no matter what the time of year. It seemed at the time to be my own private sanctuary. Now, did we examine the fan? Now, we saw that with the span, the two ships along the river and whatnot. Gaichu grunts, not turning towards you. The fan is from Sensoji Temple in Asakusa, one of the districts of Neo-Tokyo. The image is one of the less famous works by Ando Hiroshige, a woodblock printer from before the Meiji Restoration. I purchased the fan while on leave from my military training. It reminds me of how open life felt when I was younger, how the future seemed to stretch out full of possibilities, and also because I like the painting. Fair enough. Now, let's have a chat with you, Gaichu. The cabin is in a far better state than it was previously. The heat has been adjusted down and the ventilation restored. The boxes of junk and parts have been stacked and neatly arranged, and Gaichu's small amount of personal gear is tucked away in a corner. There's a small mat in the center of the cabin that looks like it doubles as both a rug and a sleeping pad. Gaichu is seated in the lotus position, eyes closed. His fingertips rest on a braille reader that is plugged into his PDA. The device fills the room with a soft clicking from the pin combinations. That would be sick! A braille reader for a PDA. As you approach, he lifts his hands from the reader's surface. Hello again, Shan. Is there something I can assist you with? Looks like you've carved out a nice little spot here. If you say so. I doubt it would be suitable for others, but I do not require much by way of space, and have few possessions. So long as I have a quiet area in which I can sit and relax, I am happy. Now, what is it that you wish to discuss? Any thoughts about that last run? A curious affair. I wish we had more time to study the nature of the mummies we found in the catacombs, as I am unaware of any spirit or paranormal phenomenon which could explain their existence. Bound spirits? A strain of HMHVV? Perhaps something else entirely. Their nature is unclear to me. I should very much like to know how the mummy's trinket came to be. It may well be that we have discovered a new form of immortality or manner of spiritual being. To store one's essence in an object. What a concept. A phylactery. Such an opportunity is one that should be studied in depth. Is there anything else I can do for you? Are there liches in Shadowrun? I don't know. And what were you reading? Gaichu draws himself up, folding his palms in his lap. With one toe, he pushes the braille reader away. It's called Hagakure, Hidden Leaves, written by Yamamoto Tsunetomo. It is a treatise on what it means to be a samurai, and how one should best serve one's lord. Required reading for the Red Samurai, unsurprisingly. Looking for hidden meaning? I have it memorized, but sometimes I have found that reading the words reveals new meanings, yes. I have left my old life behind, but old habits are the hardest to shake. The author has a central thesis. When there is a question of life or death, always choose death. Throw oneself into the fray with no resignations and act on instinct alone. My current state of affairs speaks the truth of this more robustly than any lesson in a dojo. What's the rest of the book about? Gaichu ticks off the points by unfurling successive fingers. It is partly a manual for proper behavior towards one's lord, partly a rumination on the mindset required to be victorious in combat, and partly a collection of stories. Tsunetomo believed that to truly embody the virtues of a samurai, adherents should be mindful of their path of all times, never stop training, always question how one's actions reflect on their lord. Above all, be prepared to do your duty instinctively at any time, no matter the cost. That sounds like a dangerous path to walk. I don't like to bring up the fact that he's a ghoul, so... I am certain it is, but what choice do I have? Without a cure for my condition, all that I am able to do is embrace the reality of what I have become. It does not seem like much of a choice at all to me. What does he say about masterless samurai like you? Ronin. 7 times down, 8 times up. Gaichu smiles thinly, wrapping a claw on the hilt of his sword. More specifically, if a samurai has not been a Ronin at least 7 times, then he has not truly lived as a samurai. Those were different times, however. It was common for samurai to fall out of favor with their lord and be turned loose to wander. For company men like myself, the choice is serve or die. Is there anything else you would like to discuss? I want to know more about what it's like to be a ghoul. Yeah. Gaichu cocks his head at you, his milky eyes narrowing mirthfully. Preparing for the eventuality of killing me and collecting the bounty? Make sure you leave my face intact. I would prefer it to be a well-preserved trophy. Maybe I can sell your body to an herb shop, one of the stodgy traditional ones. Gaichu burst out laughing, slapping his knee. I can see it now. 8,000 new yen an ounce for powdered ghoul bones. guaranteed to cure rheumatism and arthritis and to balance the flow of blood in your liver. Gaichu grows serious, leaning back. If you wish to know about what it's like to be me, ask away. I see no reason to conceal the details of my condition. Well, should we just go down the line? Well, no, let's save that one. Most ghouls smell like rotting meat. Why don't you? Diet and cleanliness. Most ghouls eat rotting flesh and do not breathe. I eat fresh meat and bathe regularly. Oh. So what is it like to eat people? Gaichu blinks a few times and cocks his head as if to stare at the ceiling. What is it like to eat anything else? Or for a diabetic to take insulin? It is like that, a fact of life. I have found that most people are revolted by the concept of eating the flesh of humans, rather than the act itself. Taken in isolation of social concerns, humans are no more or less edible than most mammals. The flesh can be of poor or high quality, depending on all the factors you would expect. Diet, lifestyle, etc. I prefer to prepare my meals as I would sashimi, light garnish and flavoring, but with an emphasis on the taste of the base meat. Do I enjoy it? No, not especially. Some Japanese are fond of pork and chicken sashimi, but I have never been one of them. Gaichu shrugs helplessly. But it is a fact I must accept, and if it is how things will be, I will make the best of it. Do you feel bad about having to eat people? No, but I was never a vegetarian, so why should I? Gaichu seems puzzled by the question, as he's missing nuances of meaning. It does not matter where the meat comes from. Someone who died in a car accident is as viable as someone I kill. I admit I have eaten people that I have killed, but that was of necessity. I was going to kill them anyway. Why let their bodies go to waste? Are you immortal? Considering this, Gaichu leans over onto one elbow. I have no idea. I do not believe there have been any organized studies of ghoul longevity. Most strains of the human metahuman vampiric virus impart a semblance of extended life, but I do not believe that the Krieger strain is one. Somehow, I think it is more likely that I will die in combat than of old age, no matter how long I live. Might be interesting to ask a doctor. To what end? I live by the sword, and I will die by it. I have no illusions about my chances of growing old. Gaichu shakes his head in dismissal. How would I live out my days? In a rural country village, eating people who happen to expire on nearby roads? That will not be my fate. It's very true, and the warrior very much suits his condition. So what's the deal with your teeth? What deal are you referring to? Did you file them down into those points? No, they are actually new teeth created by the infection. I suppose it is a natural advantage to have teeth better suited for carnivorous pursuits. Oh, okay. Now let's get here. I don't know how he's going to react to this, but we were talking about your father bailing you out of jail. Ah, yes, I do recall you asking about that. Gaichu's resonance is palpable in the long silence that follows. He does not continue. Is something the matter? No, Gaichu purses his lips and sighs heavily. No, everything is fine. I will tell you what you wish to know. I simply have not spoken of my family in a long time. Bad memories? No, quite good ones, actually. I haven't seen my Yasujiro in many years, but that is my fault. We may have not seen eye to eye when I was young, but we came to an understanding. Eventually. Yasujiro gave me an ultimatum after my run-in with Shiawase security. He told me that he had cut a backroom deal with a rival in Shiawase to keep me out of prison. The charges would be suspended if I finished high school and studied at Kyoto University, with the intent of joining Renraku. If I did not, Shiawase would take me into custody, and I would spend time in prison. What did that cost him? I have no idea. He refused to reveal what he had been forced to do in exchange, but I cannot imagine it was cheap. Insider information, perhaps? A deliberately botched contract? Yasujiro was a manager in the Water and Power Division, so the secret would have been lucrative, but not secret. I had always taken my family for granted. raised in a Renraku family, going to Renraku schools, I always had a sense of place, of belonging where I was. The thought of all of that vanishing, I simply could not imagine it. Suddenly, the reality of my actions became clear. Gaichu runs his fingers over his scalp, bald scalp, smiling distantly. From then on, I tried to be the son he wanted, and he seemed glad of it. We grew much closer over the next few years. He took time off to visit me when I was living in Kyoto, so some structure actually helped him out. Why would that be unusual? He was a very busy man in those days. A lot of responsibility and very little time for himself. I was impressed that he could carve off as much time as he did just to go camping with his son. A lot of nice wilderness in that part of Japan, I bet. Very much so. The land around Kyoto is protected from development due to historical and cultural significance. Most of the mountains are considered sacred, so the Diet declared them a national preserve. We made several trips to the area between Kyoto and Nara, around the village of Ide. We camped in the mountains above it. We would hunt wild deer and boar there, using my family's antique arquebus. I do not know what that is. I think it's a crossbow. That's a strange choice of weapon. It is a choice of expediency. It is nearly impossible for a private citizen to own a firearm in Japan, which is why you may so often read of Yakuza attacks involving swords and cleavers. As the Tangashima that my family owns is from the 18th century, it is exempt from ordinary regulations. Gaichu chuckles softly to himself. Perhaps ironically, hunting with my father is how I learned to prepare raw meat. Strange to think that this inadvertently prepared me for my current state of affairs. So, how do you prepare it? Soak the meat in brined water and simmer it at a low heat for several hours. Let it cool and repeat the process over several days. It cannot get too hot or I am unable to eat it. This process brings out the collagen in the meat. When it is done, I spice it with ginger and sansho pepper. Again, not too much. Mundane food is anathema to me. Sighing happily, Gaichu stares off into the distance. When he looks back, he smiles broadly at you. Those were good days. I am sorry I cannot go back to those times. When one joins the Red Samurai, one must give up all attachments to one's previous life. The company, the code, and the unit become the entirety of your world. Even your family ties have to be cut. Especially those. Anything that could distance you from a mission must be purged. Commitment to the unit and the company must be total. Applicants must be human, Japanese, and utterly devoted to Renraku. Your unit becomes your family. Your commander is your father and mother, your teammates your siblings. Red Samurai are not allowed to reveal our identities and positions to anyone outside the Special Operations Group. Even if we wanted friends outside the unit, we could not have them, so they're like stormtroopers. So how did you end up joining the Renraku military? Ah, a fair question, given my youthful indiscretions. Gaichu leans back, his blind eyes turned toward the ceiling. Are you familiar with the Kempeitai? No, what's that? The Kempeitai are the political arm of the Japanese military. Much like the commissaires of the Soviet Union, they are responsible for enforcing political and social orthodoxy. This is not just within the army, mind you. They also enforce certain laws with regards to the general populace. When I was enrolled at Kyoto University, I studied global security and political science. It is the major generally used as a gateway to private security postings with both government and corporate militaries. I knew I wanted to fight. I was a young man and my blood was always up. One of the requirements was that students join the Youth Brigade Kempeitai. The Youth Brigade is a bit like the ROTC in North America, Young Falcons in the Sioux Nation, or the District Officer Program in the Republic of Korea. Members learn to be soldiers without actually joining an army. They perform community service and promote civic pride. Performance and prestige in the Kempeitai is used to dictate later job opportunities, a bit like a good internship. Seems like the kind of thing Renraku would look favorably upon. When I was in school, the megacorporations looked favorably on Youth Brigade service. At the time, the interests of the Emperor and the corporations were aligned. A grand drive to return Japanese industry to the forefront of the world economy. Good marks from your youth brigade commander were a sure sign that you would be offered a good position with corporate security, and I wanted to be the best. These days, the megacorporations have begun to resist that kind of nationalism in favor of corporate pride. Youth brigade service is becoming a black mark rather than a positive. Gaichu shifts, resting his elbows and knees as he leans forward. I do not know if the alternative is any better, though. When I was nearing graduation, I was approached by a recruiter with Renraku Security. She told me I came from a good family and could have a promising career with the company. She offered to fast-track my application toward a potential Red Samurai position, 3 years with the Renraku military as a junior officer, and guaranteed placement in a Red Samurai training billet of my choosing. The pay was good, and the excitement of being an elite was an attractive proposition. I accepted, but I did not truly understand what I was signing up for. As I told you before, they force you to give up everything except the company and unit. That was made clear to me, but I did not truly understand it. So what happened? Exactly what you would expect happened. I signed the contract and became a soldier in Renraku's army. I was physically fit, at the top of my class, and it seemed inevitable I would see my desires fulfilled. Gaichu wraps 2 knuckles on his breastplate. Obviously, I succeeded. The training was extremely difficult, both mentally and physically. I knew that I would be isolated from my old life, but I did not anticipate the full extent of that isolation. All Red Samurai recruits report to a facility called the Forge, in Chiba. You are assigned a unit, you and 4 other recruits, and for the next 2 years, the Forge will be your home and prison. Shaking his head wistfully, Gaichu snorts. It seems ridiculous in retrospect. We were all so young. None of us had any idea what we were doing, except trying to become the best soldiers in the world. And yet those strangers became my new family, in the absence of the old. Well, tell me about the members of your unit. Gaichu wrinkles his nose if he's smelling something foul. That chapter of my life is over and done with, and they are no longer part of my world. Why would you care about any of that? Well, you said they became your surrogate family. That's important. You make a wise point. Commanders should know their soldiers as well as they know themselves. Very well. Gaichu looks down at his hands, picking up something out from beneath one claw. He continues to look at his hands while he speaks. When I was younger, I would have more readily cut off my fingers than tell you what you ask. You must understand that secrecy is absolute among the Red Samurai. Your identity becomes secret, erased from any database that might connect you to the Red Samurai. You use only your code name when in the field, and your given name is known only to your commanders and your unit. Even other Red Samurai units have no idea who you really are. Finally looking up from his hands, Gaichu leans back against the boxes. Contact with the outside world is cut off completely. Even once training is over, your communications are restricted. Maintaining relationships outside of those you work with is frowned upon. That's a lot of stress. What if a recruit can't take it? Very few recruits get to this point if they cannot handle it. We all underwent stringent psychological tests prior to this point. If a recruit cannot handle it, he and the rest of his unit are failed out of the program. The rationale is simple. If one member cannot take the training and his unit cannot carry him through, they have all failed. Ashida was our commander. He came from a rich family in Saitama, the kind of family where he was given every advantage possible, with the expectation that he would keep the family name prestigious. He was older than the rest of us, as he's already spent 6 years in the army. A very severe man, rarely given to humor. Takagawa was usually the second in command. As our designated marksman, he tended to have a better tactical view of how an operation should be run, simply because he needed to study the terrain more. He loved to get us laughing. Without him, I think I would have gone crazy in the first few months. Our mage's name was Sasaki. She had been in training as a Miko, an apprentice priestess, when her magic began to manifest. She was in the unit for the challenge and for the money. Her family had always been poor, and they had always told her that she would never amount to anything. I think she had joined the Red Samurai just to prove to them that she could do anything she wanted. My kind of attitude, I admit. Gaichu cocks his head, amused. I am unsurprised to hear it. You and Sasaki share similar attitudes. Neither of you stops to consider if your goals are attainable. You simply know that they are. Our heavy gunner's name was Amori. He kept the team honest with itself. He never had a disparaging word for anyone, but would not hesitate to call someone out for their behavior. Sasaki loved that about him. Really, she loved all of him. The two were discreet, but discretion only goes so far in such a small team. Still, he respected their privacy where possible. Is that kind of thing allowed? If the unit commander allows it, yes. We were given incredibly wide leeway in what to allow or forbid in our unit, the belief being that results were the only thing that mattered. If the unit failed, it would fail as a whole. Sasaki and Amori were crazy about each other, and it would have done more harm to keep them apart. Lastly, there was me. I was the close quarters and breaching expert, the first man in the door when we had to clear a room. I was the perfectionist on the team. Amori could get us to do anything, but I was the one who made certain we did it. Well, with style. How do you mean? If it is a thing worth doing, it is worth doing well. If that thing is also your duty, it is worth doing perfectly. Many times we would perform a drill or exercise well enough, but that was not good enough if I had to trust my life to it. That was why we became one of the best teams in the organization's history. Sounds like you miss them. Gaichu growls, his tone annoyed. Of course I do. They were my family for 8 years. Who wouldn't miss that? That sense of belonging and shared values? Even if I were to be cured, I could never go back. They have been disgraced, and I have done unforgivable things. I have been cast out for good. Are you sure? Maybe it's not as final as you think. Gaichu closes his eyes, sighing through his nose. When they ambushed me in... I can't pronounce that. It was fight or die. I killed 2 of them before I escaped. I will not be returning to the unit, no matter what. He opens his eyes after a moment, shoulders slumping. It is not an easy memory to grapple with. That's fine, Gaichu. Take your time. Thank you, Shan. I am sorry I cannot talk about it now, but I need to process the emotions. They are still raw. I am tired. Come back later and we can talk more. Interesting. So, from what I'm understanding this, Gaichu had to kill 2 members of his team when he escaped? So we have a disgraced samurai who really is just looking for a sense of family because he's been denied his previous 2. And you have Racter, who is pretty much a borderline Bond villain, trying to have humanity evolve into machines. Very interesting. Alright guys, well we've talked to the 2 gentlemen. In the next episode we will go ahead and talk to the ladies. I don't know if ISO is going to have any dialogue because we are needing to do her mission. But we shall see. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you liked the episode, go ahead and click like down below. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, that'd be a big help. And we'll see you next time. Later days, everyone.